as I was listening to Bob's presentation, I heard a lot of questions that I think we're going to get into in this presentation. My name's Ross Hansen. In your packet, it shows me as the Weber River and West Desert Regional Engineer. I recently was changed to the Utah Lake Jordan River Regional Engineer, so that's where I'm currently serving. My topic today is public water suppliers, and not a huge fan of public speaking, but I'm happy to do this because I believe the more you know, the easier my job gets, and the fewer phone calls I get in my office. So I really want to, not a big fan of doing a bunch of slides telling you to hold the questions till the end. Want to actually make this an interactive presentation, kind of a directed dialogue type thing where you can ask your questions and we can really gain some understanding and some knowledge here. Want you to feel comfortable so that we can just talk through things. If I don't know the answer to some of your questions, we've got the state engineer over there that we can corner, or we can talk afterward if you've got a specific or individual questions that we want to talk about. With that, it is a little difficult to stick to a time schedule when you try to do an open dialogue and open communication or a dynamic presentation, but we'll try it and see what we can make happen here. But more important than time is that you understand the concepts that we're talking about here. You've all seen this slide. I've got my own little caption on the bottom. I just want to try and loosen everybody up for a minute here. You know, it used to be that the people that were in a dispute would meet out at the head gate and they'd settle that dispute. But I'm not condoning violence, but nowadays what seems to happen is the two people that are in a dispute, they call their attorneys, and their attorneys call me, and then we end up in a multi-year legal battle. So I'm not sure which is better, to be quite frankly honest with you. Okay, let's start this off with, can I just take a poll of the room real quick and ask you who in the room is affiliated with or works for a public water supplier? Can I get that by a raise of hand and hold them up for just a second? Okay, I would say 90% of this class is affiliated with or represents or works for a public water supplier. This is going to be good information for you. And I think it's going to help all of us. It's going to help me because you're not going to have so many questions over the phone and meetings and whatnot, and it's going to help you because you're going to be more efficient in your jobs. So let's get started. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to define what a public water supplier is, okay? And we're going to talk about how public water suppliers are treated differently than the regular Joe citizen with his water rights, okay? How public water suppliers' water rights are treated differently than the Joe citizen's water rights. And I found that the best way to do that is to compare and contrast the two. And we're going to look at three functions, administrative functions of the state engineer. We're going to look at extensions of time to file proof. We're going to look at non-use and forfeiture, and then we're going to look at we're going to look at proof and how a public water supplier submits proof and different things that they have to do as compared to what Joe citizen has to do with his water right. And then we'll go through an example at the end, okay? Real quick, just want to throw that up. I hate it when people get up and just talk over the top of the slide. So just real quick, take a look at that slide and look at some of the acronyms that we're going to be using. They're all over in my slides, and I just don't want to confuse everybody. Okay. Next slide is, for those of you that didn't raise your hand, perhaps you're asking the question, well, how do I become a public water supplier? Don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I want to say, well, act like one. Okay? The point is really at the bottom of that slide, which is the state engineer's office does not have an application for you to fill out to become a public water supplier, and nor do we maintain a list of public water suppliers. Okay? So all I was trying to convey there is you don't have to apply to our office to become a public water supplier. You have to act like one. Okay, now I apologize for this slide and the next one. These are the actual statutes that tell us and show us what entities qualify for the special treatment that the state engineer can give to public water suppliers. So we're going to look at the statute real quick. There's 4 different entity types that can be considered public water suppliers. They are, well, first off, let's go ahead and read that. Supplies water directly or indirectly to the public for municipal, domestic, or industrial use, and is a public entity. That's the federal government, an agency of the federal government. The state government, an agency of the state government. A subdivision of the state government. Municipalities, cities, towns, that type of thing. A water corporation, a for-profit water corporation, can be considered a public water supplier, as you can see in B in the statute there. And they can be considered one, but they have to be governed and regulated by the Public Service Commission. They can't just form a water company, start making money, and not be subjected to the controls and limitations of the Public Service Commission. C, and this, and also I'll try to point out things that are going to be on your exam. Okay, C is going to be on your exam. I'm telling you that right now. There's going to be some numbers on there, so take notes of it. A community water system can qualify as a public water supplier if it supplies water to at least 100 service connections or regularly serves at least 200 year-round residents. Not seeing any strange looks, so just to make sure everybody understands that one, you could have 50 connections, 50 homes with 4 people in each home. You got your 200 residents, so you could qualify for that. You're going to see an exam question similar to that. Okay, we've got a question. Good. Hold on for the mic. Let's make sure the guys in St. George hear what's going on.
Just to go on record, that is not the definition for the Division of Drinking Water for a
good.
public water system. Those numbers don't match, and the Division of Drinking Water does have paperwork and forms to go through to become a public water system for the Division of Drinking Water.
Thank you for bringing that up. I was actually debating whether to talk about that. You brought it up, so let's talk about it real quick. The numbers for the drinking water are 15 and 25, I believe. But it's important for everybody to understand we're not talking about that. And by the way, the difference would be their wording is public water system. Okay? We're talking about public water suppliers. Okay? I know that's close, but we're talking about what we're going to talk about today is how the water rights of public water suppliers are treated differently than other typical water rights. We are not getting into the Division of Drinking Water, public water system, and all of the requirements and all of their administrative functions that they get into. Okay? Go ahead. Hold on for the mic. Let's make sure St. George can hear.
So are we just referring to irrigation water?
Absolutely not. No. We thank you for the question. No, we are not just referring to irrigation water. We are referring to any type of water use. We will simplify it and try to just talk about municipal water use, but we are certainly not talking about just irrigation water here. We're going to get much deeper than that. Okay? All right, just to finish off that community water system on that other slide, just to back up. So a community water system supplies 100 service connections and regularly serves at least 200 year-round residents. And then it goes on to the next page, which is whose voting members in that community water system own a share in the community water system, receive water from the community water system in proportion to the member's share in the community water system, and pay the rate set by the community water system based on the water the member receives. Sorry for reading that, but that's the statute and that's what we got to live by. D, let's look at D real quick. D is, we'll just move on past that. D, there's only a handful of entities, less than a handful of entities in the state that qualify as a public water supplier under D in the statute. And as you can see, it has to be a water users association where a public entity, meaning a city, a town, a special service district, owns at least 70% of the outstanding shares, and that is a local sponsor of a water project constructed by the United States Bureau of Reclamation. Really, just to rattle off one that fits under that, it would be Provo River Water Users Association. Not many fit under that. Okay? Boring stuff. All right, let's dig in and get into the meat of this thing. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the state engineer function or administrative function of receiving extensions of time requests and how to deal with them. We're going to compare and contrast how the state engineer has to deal with an extension of time request that comes from a Joe citizen, a farmer, a rancher, or anybody, and how the state engineer has to deal with an extension of time request from a public water supplier on his water rights. Okay, now just so everybody's on the same page with me, we are talking about a water right that has received an approval from the state engineer, and the entity or person is going out and trying to place that approved change application to beneficial use. He's trying to put in his well. He's trying to put in his pipes. The entity's trying to put in in their system. But they haven't quite got it done yet. They were given the state engineer gave them maybe 4 or 5 years to go out and get it done, and they're not quite done. And so they're asking for an extension of time to put the water to beneficial use, to place the water to beneficial use. Okay, here's the big differences. When a non-public water supplier, in other words, a Joe citizen, a farmer, a rancher, needs extra time, he makes application to the state engineer, and he has to show the state engineer that he has been diligent in completing the works or has to show reasonable cause for delay. Okay, not the case with public water suppliers. Look down below. Simply holding an approved application for the future public need is considered by statute, is considered reasonable and due diligence. So the state engineer doesn't have to, you don't have to, as a public water supplier, you don't have to justify to us other than, hey, we're holding this for the future need of the public. You don't have to show us what works you did. Well, you can. We'll talk about that in just a second. But anyway, it's a little different standard than what the Joe citizen has to show us to qualify to get an extension of time. Last bullet in the top paragraph. As a member, just a Joe citizen with a regular water right, you cannot receive an extension of time beyond 50 years to complete works. That's very important, that last part. But you can't get beyond 50 years. So just to keep us in perspective and keep us all on the same page, Joe citizen came in, got an approval from the state engineer to put an application to beneficial use. He can't quite get it done. He asks for an extension of time. The state engineer grants it. He asks for another one. The state engineer grants it because he's showing due diligence and reasonable cause for delay. And then we get to the 50-year mark. That Joe citizen cannot receive an approval for another extension of time to complete the work beyond 50 years. It's done. It's over. Last bullet on the bottom there, the public water supplier can be extended beyond 50 years if they submit a qualifying 40-year plan. And I heard some questions earlier about 40-year plans, kind of tried to touch on it a little bit. We're going to dive deeper into the 40-year plans here. But let me stop right there and ask if there's any questions so far. We're okay? Okay. We're going to talk about what the contents of the 40-year plan are. By show of hands, who has submitted to our office a 40-year plan? Okay. About 40% of you. Okay, good. I'm guessing that some of you will have to do this. If you work with, 90% of you work for a public water supplier or with a public water supplier, I'm guessing that at some point in your career you're going to have to do one of these. Okay? A 40-year plan, and these are critical because we get a lot of confusion and a lot of phone calls on these things. A 40-year plan has to show the projected population growth of the public water supplier and where his service area is and where it's going to grow to. He's got to project how much population he's going to have, and he's going to have to project where his system's going to grow to. And he's going to have to determine how much water he's going to need based on those projections. Okay? It's going to need, I'll say it, sorry. You're also in that public, or in that 40-year plan, you're going to have to show works that were constructed. And I'm going to, this is written on 2 slides, this one and the next one, but you need to understand that a 40-year plan needs to be water rights specific. You can't just come into our office and hand us a 40-year plan and say, our city's going to be really big, and we're going to have 20 million people here, and we need all our water rights extended anytime we ask you for one. Okay? You can't do that. It's got to be water rights specific. Okay, the service area comments on the right side of that slide. Let's talk about those for just a second. This is going to be on your exam, but we'll cover it a little deeper at the very end on the last slide. But what is the service area of a public water supplier, i.e. a city? Let's just simplify it and talk about a city. What's the service area of the city? What's the service area of a Joe citizen, a farmer, a rancher? The service area of the place of use of a Joe rancher is the 40-acre section in which he is identifying where he's going to put the water to beneficial use. The service area of a city is where the pipe distribution network can reach, and it can change, and it can expand over time. There's a big difference there. Okay? We'll talk more about that in the last slide. In the 40-year plan, what we want to see in those is we want to see you tabulating the existing water rights that you currently have. So let's make sure we're all on the same page. A city might have 4 or 5 or 6 or 20 water rights, and some of those water rights are perfected already. Okay, that's not what we're necessarily talking about here. I do want to get into that just a little bit because Kent asked me to. But we're not necessarily talking about the certificated water rights. We're talking about the water rights that still need proof done on them. And so what we're asking you to do is show us the certificated water rights that the city already has, and we're asking you to show us why the water right that you're focusing in on should be granted an extension of time. Okay, so we're asking to tabulate how much water you currently have certificated, and then saying, okay, what's your population growth? What are you expecting? What's your projected water use? And why do you need this other water right extended? That's what we're trying to get you to show us in a 40-year plan. Now, I gave this example last year. I'm going to give it to you again. This is a real life scenario. I received a 40-year plan from a city who will remain nameless. And it went something like this. So listen to the numbers real closely. It came in and they tabulated up. They'd done a real pretty and nice job on their 40-year plan. And they tabulated up the certificated water rights that the city owned. And I'll throw out some fake numbers so that you can't identify the city, but let's say that the water rights that they had certificated equated to 20,000 acre-feet of water. Okay, the paper they had equated to 20,000 acre-feet of water. They then did their beautiful tabulations, everything projected their population, projected their demand in 40 years, and they came back and they wrote on that plan that in 40 years, they're going to need 18,000 acre-feet of water. Oh, I'm getting some people smiling. Good, good. Some people are getting that. Okay, for those that haven't picked up on it, they showed me in their 40-year plan that they didn't need the water right that they were trying to get extended. They didn't need it. They had plenty of certificated water already. I sent that back to them, and I said, I think you need to try again. How do they try again? Go get an engineer that knows voodoo? I don't know. I don't know what you do. One thing Kent wanted me to point out, and it fits right into this right here, is, well, he's bringing him the microphone, is in that scenario, That's a little touchy, because when you show me that you have 20,000 acre feet of certificated water, and you're telling me that in your 40-year plan you're only going to need 18,000, that starts getting into a little bit of a question as to, do you even need the certificated water that you have? Let alone the water right you're trying to extend in your 40-year plan. Do you even need the certificated water you have? Consult with your attorneys, but perhaps in those situations you might want to even consider filing a non-use application on the 2,000 acre feet that you have certificated. Maybe. Or maybe you want to get a little more detailed, creative with your 40-year plan. Okay, go ahead.
Ross, for the record, that was not my city, the one that submitted that.
Which city are you with?
American Fork City.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
But in my experience working with land use is very dynamic. I share land with the county. So my service area changes every year with new annexations. So that would be fair to say that this 40-year plan is a very dynamic 40-year plan that should be submitted once a year or every 2 years to update your records. What is a low density area could change to high density housing, and then the requirements for water is increasing dramatically, which is a situation that I have right now. So my 40-year plan could be probably amended every year based on land use.
That question was so spot on. These guys are going to think I planted you in the audience. I promise I did not. So bullet 3 on there, and it's critical. Your 40-year plan is dynamic. It's changing all the time. Could be changing according to what he said, which is the population is booming. The population's getting a lot, you're gaining a lot more population than you'd originally anticipated. That changes your 40-year plan, makes changes to it. Another simple example of what would change a 40-year plan would be, you've got your portfolio of certificated water rights, and some of them have become certificated over the last year. You got your ones that you're trying to proof up on, and you've been able to prove up on some of them. No, those move over to the list of certificated rights in your 40-year plan. So things are constantly changing in a 40-year plan. If you walk out of here with nothing else, know that you can't just hand us a 40-year plan, put it in your file, and then get it out every time you need an extension of time. It doesn't work like that. That 40-year plan is dynamic and has to change all the time. And last bullet, I'll say it one more time, they have to be water right specific. Okay, so you don't just hand us a generic 40-year plan for the city. It has to say, this is the water right that I'm trying to get extended. I need an extension of time on this one, state engineer, and here's why. Here's the data why. Any questions, any other questions on that? Thank you for that question, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, I've done the water right plans for people before, and you find a city or a...
Hold on one second. I can tell this is going to be a good question.
All right. I've done water right plans for cities and towns, and you find a city, nobody wants to forfeit their water rights. Everybody wants to keep their water rights, and I see a real small town that hasn't grown for, their water rights are getting close to the 50-year mark, and they haven't grown since all that 50 years, and they want me to do a plan for their water, and you said get creative in your plan. So I can say, I think that this community is going to grow at a 50% growth rate for the next 10 years, and they're going to need that water. And I turn it in and put it on the plan, and certainly when you look at it that way, they're going to need the water. But it's not real. It's not going to happen. You know, it's like, so.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Make sure that when you leave here, you don't go put your license on the line and lie to us. Right? I mean, it's your stamp. It's your stamp you're putting down there. You don't want to get too creative. You got to be kind of careful.
Maybe that town will grow.
And maybe it will. Exactly. No one knows, right? But you have to be careful. There's got to be some give and take there, but you're spot on your comment, though. It's spot on what we need to talk about here. You do need to look into it and you as a professional have to decide just how far you want to extend out there and get creative and use voodoo to create numbers. But they have to be reasonable. I mean, we have to look at them and go, oh, come on, the city of Eskdale is not going to be New York City in 20 years or 40 years. It's not going to happen. So you got to be a little bit grounded, and you got to remember, in the end, it's your license that's on the line, okay?
So that's an exaggeration. Usually it's just increase the growth rate a little bit. Just enough to,
And it changes a lot, doesn't it?
yeah, that's where the creative part comes in.
It changes a lot. Thank you for perfect comments, and they need to be thought through, and I'll leave that to each individual and your attorneys to decide just how creative you want to get on your 40-year plan, okay? But know from my example that I was trying to give to you that you don't want to hand me one that shows that you've got more certificated water than your city's going to need in 40 years. Unless you're just acknowledging it. Maybe it's time to just say, hey, look, we got too much water. We got too much paper water, guys. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. No one's going to die. Okay? All right. Now, so any other questions on that? 40-year plans. Is everybody straight on that? I want to make sure you guys understand. I get lots of phone calls on 40-year plans. Okay? Now whenever you see the word forfeiture, the hairs on the back of the neck goes up and everybody gets excited, and I really wish that wouldn't happen. James and I were just joking a minute ago that everybody gets the hairs on the neck up when we talk forfeiture, but in reality, forfeiture is a very, very minute part of the water right world. How many actions have been taken to court are very few, okay? But let's talk about it with regard to public water suppliers and compare and contrast how Joe Citizen's water right is handled compared to how public water suppliers' water rights are handled when it comes to non-use and forfeiture. Okay, top thing says water rights / portions owned by a non-public water supplier entity are subject to forfeiture if not used for a period of 7 years. We've all touched on that. You guys have heard that over the last day and a half. But what we want to dive into here is Section 73-1-4 exempts water rights owned by public water suppliers from forfeiture. It exempts them from it. Now, there's some fine nitty-gritty details here that a lot of people don't understand. That next bullet. If the public water supplier acquires a water right from a farmer, from anybody, could be an ag water right, could be anything, if they acquire a water right after May 2nd, 2008, that date's on your exam, if they acquire it after that date, they have to not only file a change application, but they must receive an approval on that change application from the state engineer. Let's think about that one for a second. So we got an ag water right. Let's keep it simple. We got an ag water right being used by Joe Farmer, and the city, he stops growing alfalfa on his piece of property, and he starts growing homes. Okay, and part of that justification for him to be able to grow homes on his property by a developer is to turn his water right into the city. City takes possession and takes ownership of that water right. If the water right has, after May 2nd, 2008, if the water right doesn't get a change application approved on it, if a change application is approved on it, it could be subject to forfeiture. Okay, now here's something you really need to think through. Let's say that ag water right hasn't been being used for 30 years. And the city takes control of it. What does the state engineer do when the city files the change application to move from ag to municipal on that farmer's water right? I mean, that's the thing you got to consider. Wait, get your mic. He's got a question. Think about that one for a second. What predicament is the state engineer in when you try to submit that change application and the water hasn't been being used for 30 years?
Does the state engineer have the authority to forfeit the water right at that point, or do they just not do anything with the water right?
Good question. Very good question. Forfeiture, I'll say the official language, or try anyway. Forfeiture is a judicial action. The state engineer does not forfeit a water right. A little bit of semantics here. We don't forfeit a water right, but we also probably can't approve that change application. Did we forfeit the water right? That's a judicial action. Did we not approve the change application? That's our choice. That's the state engineer acting according to statute. Make sense? There's a fine line there. We didn't forfeit the water right, and you're more than welcome to go put the water back to use, but we may not approve that change application. Go ahead. Wait, get your mic. You're asking really good questions. Let's make sure St. George can hear you.
So would it be a good idea for a public water supplier, before they buy the water right, to file a change application and see if the state will approve that change?
Holy cow, you're going to think I planted him here. You guys are going to think I'm paying these audience members. Perfect question. Not your legal counsel, but I would tell anybody that ever asked me, if you're looking at buying a water right, whether you're a city, a municipality, or a Joe citizen, I'd recommend that you condition a purchase of a water right on an approval, a change application approval of the state engineer. Critical question. Thank you for asking it. If you walk out of here with that knowledge, you won, okay? Because then your city's not sitting, or your public water supplier is not sitting there holding a water right that hasn't been being used for 30 years wondering what to do with it. The flip-flop question that you should be asking, that hasn't been asked yet, is what if we got the water right prior to May 2nd, 2008 and it hasn't been being used? Should be asking that question. What if we've got in our public water supplier's portfolio of water, we've got a water right that hasn't been being used for 30 years, but we got it in our name, we got ownership of it, we took ownership of it prior to May 2nd, 2008, and the answer to that is we're not going to look at non-use. Okay? Any questions on that one? That's good stuff. You guys are helping me a ton here. Okay? All right, let's go to the next slide here. We're now going to talk about the administrative function of proofing up a water right. Okay? And we're going to just kind of compare and contrast some things that have been go on with public water supplier water rights when it comes to proof. Okay? Tell you a story that I don't even understand. Been working here for 12 years, don't understand this. But historically, the state engineer, a city, let's keep it simple, a city would come into the state engineer's office and say, hey, we found a great place to drill a well. And we'd like a water right for our city to drill that well and use water from it. We think we can get 5 CFS of water out of that well. Ask the state engineer for that. The state engineer approves the application to appropriate. The city goes out, drills their well, gets a beautifully producing well, drops a pump in there that pumps 5 CFS. Great producing well. They fill out their proof, submit it to the state engineer, and they receive a certificate that they've got a nice well that pumps 5 CFS, and they've got a certificate for it now. That used to historically occur. That's actually fairly common. Not anymore. Those days are over. Okay? The capacity of the well is just one component of a proof. Okay? We need you, when you're submitting proof, to show us a tabulation of how much water rights how many water rights, let me say that a little differently, how many water rights are coming from that well, and compare that to what the well can produce, okay, and show us that you actually are beneficially using, there's the key words, you've got to be beneficially using the water, okay? And then we need to look at what you're reporting, your public water supplier, you're reporting to the water use program in our office, which you're going to learn more about today. But if you're not showing us that you're using the amount of water that you want to proof up on, we can't just issue a certificate for a flow rate anymore. Those days are over. We're going to go through an example on that. We're going to talk real deep into that because I get questions on that all the time. The question goes something like this. Hey, Ross, we're a public water supplier. Should we proof up on this right or should we file an extension of time? I get that question all the time. And we're going to go through an example so that when you walk out of here, you know the answer, how to figure out the answer to that question. Okay? A little comic relief here. Let's hope this works. This is like a day in the life of this working at the state engineer's office. I've showed this video before. I really like it. I think it's funny. But it's working at the state engineer's office is kind of like playing musical chairs, and you just can't win no matter what you do. So let's see if I can get this to work. Hopefully. Watch the girl in the green. Come up to the Division of Water Rights, you'll see that happening. I'm kidding. Okay, just a little break for a second before we dig into the example. Hopefully if I can move forward. Uh-oh, it's not moving forward, gentlemen. There we go. No, that moved backward. Okay. All right. What we're going to do on this example is I'll give you kind of in a story problem kind of a way so you really understand what we're diving into, and then I'll flip up a spreadsheet and we'll look at the numbers. Okay, but really pay attention to the numbers. You will have an exam question similar to this. Maybe even a couple of exam questions similar to this. So it's important. So let's go through it. Again, this is very applicable because I'm getting questions about this kind of thing all the time. That's why we're talking about it. The city has two water rights. Public water supplier, we're going to use city to keep it simple, has two water rights. One of them has the right to divert 4 CFS, and the other one has the right to divert 5 CFS. Very similar to the story I just told you where they came into the state engineer's office, asked for a 5 CFS right, they put a pump to pump 5 CFS, and they submitted proof, we gave them a certificate. Okay, so they have two of those. One that's 4 CFS, one that's 5 CFS. If you take those two numbers, that's 9 CFS, and you multiply that times the number of seconds in a year, and you could pump from those wells 6,500 acre-feet of water under the water rights. Legally authorized to pump 6,500 acre-feet of water. Okay? Now we're going to talk about well capacity. Keep these things separate in your mind. Well capacity. Beautiful pumping wells. Those things are great producing wells, and well A can produce 6 CFS. Well B can produce 5 CFS, so 11 CFS total. Okay, great producing wells. In addition to that, the next bullet down, information that we have or that's out there is that the city, the public water supplier, is reporting to the Division of Water Right Water Use Program that annually they're pumping 2,000 acre-feet of water. That's the most they've ever used, is 2,000 acre-feet of water. Very important. Okay. Developer comes in, wants to develop a piece of land, and he brings the farmer's water right into the city and says, here's the water right, city. Go ahead and take it and file an application to the state engineer. We're going to stop growing alfalfa and we're going to start growing houses on this property. Okay? So the city files a change application with our office, receives approval to move, the water was being used on the farmer's field. State engineer granted the approval and now has to put the water to beneficial, the city needs to put the water to beneficial use. So of that 600 acre feet, here's the question. When the city files proof on that change application for the farmer's water right, how much of that water can be certificated? Come on, feed me. Okay, I got one guy saying 0, 2 guys saying 0. Anybody disagree with 0? Go ahead.
Well, if they've got non-use applications filed on some of the rights that they're already using.
Okay, put him on there and let's let St. George hear your question. Go ahead.
Well, if they've got non-use applications, they'll have room to move water in.
Do they? Anybody got any comments on that one? If they have non-use applications, first off, I'd have to ask, why do they have non-use applications? That would be one of my first questions. On that, I'm assuming you're saying they've got non-use applications on the 4 CFS right and the 5 CFS right.
Or part of them.
Or part of them. And you're saying, well, we're not using those, but we're going to replace that with this 600 acre feet? I see some heads shaking. That doesn't make sense, does it? We can't do that. Can't shuffle water. Can't say, we're going to put those on the side here and we're going to use these. I mean, your portfolio of water rights is your portfolio of water rights. That's the volume you can deliver. And in this example that we're throwing out right here, you've got the right to divert 6,500 acre feet and you're only diverting 2,000. Does that sound right? So I've got some zeros over here. I've got, if you put it in non-use, maybe. I've got over here. Anybody else got any thoughts on how much water of that 600 acre feet they could prove up on? Go ahead.
Would this scenario follow into their 40-year plan, even though they can't use it right now, but they show that they can use it down the road?
Great comment. Great comment. Perhaps. I will get into that on this next sheet. We're going to talk more about it, but perfect comment. It's spot on. Anybody else want to comment on this before we go to the numbers? Well, I've got the answer coming up right after this one. One more click and we get the answer. So I had some zeros, I had some maybes, I had some, well, file an extension or file a 40-year plan. The answer is there's nothing that it can prove up on. They're only using 2,000 acre feet of water. They're not placing more than 6,500 acre feet to beneficial use. Now, those of you that are still skeptical a little bit, let's go to the next one and show you the numbers, okay? I'll try to get this mouse and point at things. Okay, so water right 1 was for 4 CFS. Not necessarily important that okay, well, 4 CFS times the number of seconds a year roughly produces 2,880 acre feet. The 5 CFS right could potentially be covered for 3,620 acre feet. That totals 9 CFS, and there's the 6,500 acre feet of water. Now the city goes and gets a hold of the farmer's water right, which is another 600 acre feet of water. That water then, added to the amount of paper water they are authorized to divert now, adds to or sums to 7,100 acre feet of water. Okay, now come down here with me. Look at this. So the capacities of the well, they're nice producing wells. They will produce, from the one you can get 4,344 acre feet, and from the other one you can get 3,620 acre feet. In total, that is 7,964 acre feet. Now you look right there at my little green OK. Well, as far as that test goes, we're good. That's okay. We're great. The wells will produce more water than there is in certificated water rights, or in water rights in the portfolio of the city is probably how I better say that. So we're good there, but that's old school thinking. Okay? We also need to look at what water has been placed to beneficial use, which then we come down to this next line. You're reporting to the state engineer's office that you've placed to beneficial use 2,000 acre feet. That is much, much less than 6,500 acre feet. And so is there any water that can be proved up on any of that at 600 acre feet that has been placed to beneficial use? Maybe that's the best way to say it. I think I just said that good right there. Is there any of that 600 acre feet that has been placed to beneficial use? Not according to those numbers. So we could not issue a certificate on that change application that moved the water from the farm to the city. Questions, comments, comic relief? Go ahead. Wait for the mic.
In this specific example, the city, how do I put this? Do you ever have problems with cities like underreporting, like their wells production with this sort of thing?
Yeah. Yes, it happens. There has been in the past a lot of confusion with respect to water use reporting by cities. And yes, there is some confusion on our records. But the takeaway lesson to you as a public water supplier employee or consultant is help your city make sure they're accurately reporting information to the water use program, because it plays in when it comes to proofing. Correct? Anybody else have comments on that? Go ahead, wait for your mic.
Just a quick question on this is, can this then be incorporated into their 40-year plan? Let's say that they realize they're only reporting 2,000 acre feet being used. Their 40-year plan shows that they need the additional, 4,000 or 5,900 plus the 600 acre feet that they buy from the farmer. Can they then incorporate, it hasn't been proofed up on, it's not certificated, but can they use that for their 40-year plan?
Perfect question. Ties right back to yours. Okay, and I was wanting to tie that back together, so right spot on here. Okay, so the lesson learned, and here's the phone call that comes into me from the city. The city says, hey, should I proof up on this water right, or should I file an extension of time with the corresponding 40-year plan? That's what the city's asking. I get these calls all the time. The answer is, in this scenario, you should file an extension of time with a 40-year plan and incorporate this information into the 40-year plan.
Get real creative on your 40-year plan, more creative.
Yeah, and go back to what he said earlier, which was you need to make sure that the population, projected population, is greater than 7,100 acre feet of water is going to take care of. In other words, you need to show that your city's going to need in the next 40 years more than 7,100 acre feet. Does that tie it back together? You first and then here. Go ahead.
So as the city I work for, we're just starting up a PI system. So we're actually putting water in a pond and pressurizing up part of the town. Would we want to take that water instead of that 600, instead of putting it into our wells, just take that and put it into our pressurized irrigation and start using it through that direction?
Perhaps. I can't tell you what's the best way to operate your system, but if you've got a municipal water right, we're looking at total water use. We're looking when you report to the water use program, you got a municipal right, we're looking at water that was diverted to the golf courses. We're looking at water that was diverted to the houses, to the industrial facilities, everything. We're looking at, when we talk about that 2,000 number that got reported to water use, that's the amount of water you diverted.
That's everything, not just
Right.
not just the wells. That's
Right.
everything in the whole county.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. I think he had a question. You still have it? Hold on for the mic.
That basically answered well. I was going to say, rather than take that water from the developer, you could keep it as irrigation and use it, show that you're putting it to beneficial use, whatever, I guess, on the alfalfa. Isn't that what he was kind of saying? Okay, so, or you could also just tell the developer to sell the water right before you take over, before you start building on the land, and then give the city the money for the water right, because once the city takes a water right from someone, once it becomes municipal water, they can't sell it, they can't resell it, so they could just take the money for it, and then they've got enough water to cover their needs.
Good point. Thank you. Spot on with the comment. So what he basically said was, hey, the farmer doesn't have to just immediately retire the use as soon as he gives the water right over to the city. He can still continue to use the water there, even though a change application has been filed with the state engineer's office to move it to municipal. That can still happen. Go ahead.
Sorry, one more question. So
You're
eventually
fine.
what we're saying is there's going to be water for like in the town I live in, it's being flooded, half of it, and half of it's being, we're just doing the transfer over. But eventually it's all going to be built out. But so there's going to be a line of point where we don't need to take any more water, because obviously our usage, once it's all built out, is not going to do what the usage is right now, because it's not flood irrigated ground. So eventually there is going to be a line that we don't take any more water, because you're not going to use it. You're not going to show use of it. Is that correct?
Absolutely spot on with your comment. Thank you, because I mean, let's face it, municipalities, cities, towns, everybody's in the mode of grab water, grab paper water. We need water. I think might be time to start looking at, do you really need the water? And that's a take home from this. You really need it? You sure you're supposed to be getting that water? But then you ask, okay, well, what happens to the water? Well, maybe the water doesn't need to be used anymore. Maybe the farmer, I know everybody doesn't want to hear this, but maybe the farmer and his acreage that was now growing houses instead of alfalfa doesn't need water anymore. My goodness, you'd have to give up paper water that's so valuable. No one's going to do that. But the city's in the predicament of, well, we can't really show in our 40-year plan that we even need the water. These are all things that you have to take into consideration. Mike, right here.
So does that mean that the farmer or the canal company has to justify their water shares that they're putting back into their stock, saying, well, we used to use this much, but now that it's homes that don't use it, how can we justify how much we're using out of the canal?
Okay, remember in your question, good question, but it's deep. Remember in your question a fundamental underlying concept, and that is beneficial use is the limit and the measure of a water right. It's not based on how much flow you're taking out of a canal. The real measure of a water right is the beneficial use. And in an agricultural situation, that beneficial use is the acreage that's being irrigated. So you come in, or you try to quantify a water right, you might walk in our door and say, I divert 2 CFS for 14 hours every Thursday. We would say, on what? What's your beneficial use? That's what we're asking. That's the limit and the measure of the right. Okay, so when the land stops, when that irrigation or the beneficial use stops growing alfalfa and starts growing homes, that's that water right. That's it. That's the limit of it. Is stopping irrigating and starting to put it into homes. If you don't need as much moved over to the homes, if you're saying, well, how much water do I need to calculate to move over there? Well, that's why you got engineers, surveyors, and attorneys and people to help you figure out how much water should go into those homes. Maybe you don't need to move as much as you originally thought, but you got to do those calculations and figure it out. Hopefully somebody else has already talked about diversion and depletion. If not, it's coming. Has it happened already? But anyway, those are the calculations you have to go through and decide how much water does need to go in for those homes. Okay, other questions? Go ahead. We're going to make sure you, I don't know where we're at on time, but we're going to make sure you feel warm and fuzzy before you leave here.
Thanks. I just want to admit to being old school first. So let me ask you about the 40-year plan.
Okay?
Technically, the 40-year plan requirement is triggered with extensions after 50 years.
Okay?
So in this case, you may not have anything that qualifies an extension after 50 years. In other words, you want to bring in more water to meet future needs, but you haven't really had to submit a 40-year plan.
Okay?
You don't need to submit a 40-year plan if it's before 50 years and all your water rights are still within that 50-year extension. All you have to do is submit proof that you can use the water in the future. Now, is that a true statement, or?
You are spot on. I want to make sure, you're good, great question. Let's make sure, let's separate it out and make sure we're on the same page. Before 50 years, a public water supplier does not need to provide a 40-year plan to the state engineer in order to be granted an extension of time. I think that was the root of your question. But after, if you're going beyond 50 years, remember 50 years is that magic mark where I tried to differentiate between a public water supplier's water right and a Joe citizen's water right. He can't get beyond 50 years. But this public water supplier can, with the caveat that a 40-year plan needs to be submitted with that extension request.
But as far as approving the change application, if you haven't triggered the 40-year plan, if you're still within the 50 years, in order for the state engineer to consider this change application, you just need to prove that you need the water. It doesn't necessarily need a 40-year plan. In other words, they're two different things.
They are. Thank you. You got it right there. They're two different things. A 40-year plan comes into play when you're trying to extend a water and you can't proof it up yet because you haven't placed it to beneficial use. That's when that comes into play. A change application, on the other hand, is an upfront thing where you took over the city took over the farmer's water right, and they come with a change application saying, "Hey, Mr. State Engineer, we'd like to use this 600 acre feet from this farmer's field, and we want to put it into municipal use in our city." The state engineer looks at several things, as Teresa described yesterday. We look at several things, but let's simplify. Let's keep things simple. Mainly, we're going to look at, okay, well, are you going to affect somebody? Are you going to interfere with somebody? If you do that, if you take an additional 600 acre feet out of your wells, is that going to interfere with somebody, cause somebody problems? Is it going to enlarge the water right? The 600 acre foot water right from the farmer? Has the water right been being used for the last 7 years? Those are the things we're looking at in that process. The 40-year plan is on the end of it when you're needing to extend the water right. Two different processes here.
Yeah, so theoretically, this additional water, this 600 acre feet, has been placed to beneficial use. There's no problem.
By the farmer.
By the farmer.
Okay.
There's no question about that.
Okay.
City can prove that within a reasonable amount of time it needs that additional water. It doesn't matter what they're diverting now.
Okay?
Okay? So you don't need a 40-year plan.
No, you do not have to submit a 40-year plan when you submit your change application.
As long as you submit a change application and provide justification, once you get it approved, if you've done your job, then you can worry about extending.
Spot on. Okay. Spot on. Any other questions? Good, this is great. We're going to walk out here with tons of knowledge here. How's St. George doing? Do they have any comments coming in? Okay.
Okay, my question is kind of a newbie question, I think, but in this scenario, if the city or the public water service supplier, thank you, goes over 50 years, submits a 40-year application, then after 40 years, they don't submit proof, is that water open for appropriation? And if so, in an application like that, would you be applying to dig a well near the same source?
Okay, good question. Let's talk through that. So let me simplify it a little bit, and you don't let me get off track on your question, but let me simplify. Let's say that the city is unable to submit proof on the water right and can't show in their 40-year plan that they need it. And so they let it go. Okay? You asked, well, who gets it? Kind of, is what you asked. Well, in an over-appropriated basin, it reverts to the public. And if you think about the physical water, the physical water is going to go to the next senior appropriator. Okay? Based on priority. In other words, once the city lets it go in an over-appropriated basin, it'd be, well, we've got the basin closed, so you're not going to be able to come in and say, hey, the city just let a 600 acre foot water right lapse. I want it. Well, we're going to say, well, it's over-appropriated. By over-appropriated, do you understand what that means? By over-appropriated, I mean, hey, there's 100,000 acre feet of water that actually comes into this basin yearly, annually, and we've issued 180,000 acre feet of paper water. This is just going to make up the difference. Catch us up, if you will. Make it so our bank account's not overdrafted. How's that? That's what's happening. Did I get it all, or was there another part of that I missed? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's move to that last slide. This is on your exam, or part of this is on your exam, and it is a big question that I get all the time. So a public water service area with respect to a public water supplier confuses a lot of people. It is the geographic area that the public water supplier agrees to serve water to and can physically serve it to. I put that qualifier on there because Logan can't agree to serve water to somebody down in St. George. They can agree to it, but I don't think they can physically do that. Maybe they can, I don't know. But if they could, I guess their service area could grow. But that's the point I'm trying to make, is the service area does expand when the distribution system expands. And it is defined as the area that the public water supplier can serve. Okay? The call I get all the time is, should I file a change application? We just added a subdivision to our city. Do I need a change application? This is critical. What say you? I get some no's. Yeses, anybody? The no's hold. You don't need a change application. Your service area can expand. Okay? It can expand. You don't need to file a change application. And that helps all of us. It helps you in running your system. It helps me because I don't have to deal with a change application and all the protests and hearings that come with it. So it's just a good thing. It's a good thing for you to know we get a lot of questions on that. Any questions on that one? Okay, I'm wrapping up here. Does anybody have any questions on the whole presentation that you want to talk about? I want to make sure you leave here with knowledge and understanding, and I hope that's happened. So, oh, we do have one more question. Go ahead. Not one more, whatever we need to take.
So you say it can expand. Can it expand on ground that was never irrigated in the past, like irrigatable acreage?
Sure. Sure.
Okay. So you can expand outside of that realm.
You bet.
All right.
Good question. Any others? Okay, hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I appreciate your time. Thank you.